Hey there, this is Adam again, and today we're gonna be talking about logic apps and control actions. Control actions are specific category of actions which allow you to implement loops, conditions, and parallel execution. I will be talking about those in detail today, so stay tuned. Let's jump straight to it. There are several ways you can control the flow using parallel execution, conditional execution, loops, also called iterations, terminate, and a scope. I will be talking about each one of those today, and I will showcase the demo of each also. First, you have parallel execution. This is a way for you to split your workflow into two separate parallel branches. Each branch is executed separately without affecting one or another, so it's a great way to also handle some exception. So with this, we can actually go straight to the portal and showcase this parallel execution demo. In the portal, I have my own resource group, and in that resource group, I created several logic apps. For each logic app, I'm going to be showcasing a demo. I'm going to go to the parallel. Don't worry, all of them are actually empty. So those are blank logic apps. I will actually start from the blank logic app in each case. But before I do, I want to go here into storage account, because I like my demos to be always showcasing some live scenarios. So I'll be using blob storage for integration purposes. I'll be uploading some files and using some tables. So I'll go to Storage Explorer, to blob containers, and create one blob container called demo. This is where I will be uploading my files. And I also want to create a table in a table storage called, I don't know, maybe a log. I'll be using this table to log some information whenever new files being uploaded. Since this is ready, I can actually go to our parallel logic app and start creating it. So let's go to Designer. And since we want to integrate with blob storage, I will start from the blank logic app and type blob. We want to trigger whenever there's a new blob added on a storage. I need to create a storage account connection and select my storage account. I need to select a container. That was our demo container. I want to check it every 3 minutes, and whenever there's a new blob, I will do parallel execution, in which I will want to do two actions. First of all, I want to delete the blob that we're gonna upload. So let's find delete blob action, and we need to specify the blob to be deleted. So in the expression, we look for the file path. Interestingly, it says list of file name, because this block allows you to process files one by one, or in the settings you can change to process multiple files. In this case, it's gonna be a list. In our case, it's just a singular file. And now we want to do a parallel execution. It's actually very tricky if you don't know it, but to do parallel execution, you just hover over this arrow here, click on this plus button and add parallel branch. And this is actually how easy it is. It's just, I would say, a tricky hidden one. So right now we're gonna click on Azure Table Storage, and we're gonna find the insert or merge entity. We're gonna create a table connection and select our table storage. And we need to specify a table. That's gonna be our log table. We need to specify a partition key, in which case we're gonna be using an expression to generate new ID. So add dynamic content. We need to scroll a little bit to the right. There's a run function, but we actually don't need run. We were gonna use GUID. It's a global unique identifier function. I'm gonna copy this because I also want to use that for the key. And you need to specify a JSON entity. And I'm gonna supply for the file name of the JSON entity the file name that we're processing. And I guess that's it. So let's save this and let's test the demo. So I will open the second tab on the portal, and in this tab I will open the resource group, open the storage container, and I'll be uploading here some files, and I will keep Designer open in a second tab. So I will hit upload, choose some files, and I'm gonna choose some image file. In order for our execution to start idly, I'm gonna hit run to force the execution run idly, because I don't want to wait those 3 minutes right now. Successfully check the trigger. That means in just a couple of seconds we're gonna see the output. As you see, we are able to successfully run 2 actions in parallel. We can even validate this result by showing that there's no blob anymore, and by going to Storage Explorer, showing that the table is filled with one entry called image3png. So let's go back to the presentation, and the next on our list, actually, yeah, sorry, I forgot about this, but this is our demo that we just performed. New blob, add table row, and delete blob in parallel. Then next we have conditional execution. So this is the first condition that we're gonna be working on. So if you have those 2 parallel branches, if you want to choose only one of them depending on some sort of condition, this is called condition. Condition is part of the control action group, and it's one of the actions. The demo that we're gonna do right now is whenever a new file comes in, if it's an archive, we want to add this table row. If it's not, we want to delete the blob. So let's go back to the portal. I'm gonna close this and open the empty Condition Logic App. So again, start blank Logic App, select blob storage, new files, demo container, and find control action, and in that action select condition, and this is the block for creating conditions. So we need to use the file name, and let's check if that file name ends with zip. That means it's our archive, and if it's true, let's add our table entity, so table storage, insert or merge entity, log table, again an expression for GUID. I'm gonna just copy paste this. Same for the row key, and for the entity we just pass again the JSON with the file name. So let's find the file name, and if it's not true, let's use blob action to delete the blob, and to specify the blob and specify the path. Let's hit save. Let's go back to our blob container and upload a couple of files. So let's upload zip and an image, and hit run. Successfully check the trigger. That means in a couple of seconds we're gonna get the results. And the result, it looks just great. So that means one of the files that we process right now is an image file. Therefore we deleted this because condition was executed and it was not true. If we're gonna upload the zip file now, of course I could show you let's override it. I can show you the history, or can I just run this very quickly again for the zip file. And for the zip file, as you see, the condition evaluated to true, therefore we went to the separate branch, and that was for our zip file. Going back to the presentation, the next on the list is switch control. Because if you want to have more than 2 branches, because only 2 branches can be created using condition, you can use switch control. Let's go back to the portal and showcase you the switch control. So let's open our case and again create a blob storage trigger. This will be again for the demo. And let's create new action. Switch is also part of the control actions, therefore you click here and click switch, and by default you are presented with this kind of UI. You have a condition that you evaluate on, and a case and a default action. So if nothing goes into any of the cases, it will go into default case. So let's go here, and instead of using extension, we're gonna use media type. So there are a couple of media types that you can use here. Each file has its own media type. If you don't know media type, you can either check the history of the execution, or just paste this from the blob storage. I will use third portal window to do so. So I'm gonna go back to my resource group and I will use the first parallel logic app that we used. Since I have a history for all the runs so far, so I can actually use it. I'm gonna choose the last one, and the last one was for the zip file. So if you actually click on the trigger, you can actually scroll down and find the media type. So there's a media type for compressed here. So in our demo that we want to do will be this. So whenever there's a new blob coming in, if it's PNG file, do nothing. If it's an archive, add a table row. If it's any other file, delete the blob. So let's do that. First of all, as you've seen on the screen, we will need 3 blocks. So you can add a block by hitting this plus here. Let's zoom this out a little bit so we see almost everything. So if we remember our case, the middle one, archive, that's the case for media type equals to application zip compressed. Let's get our PNG file from the second execution. So in case this was an image file, let's scroll down. Sorry, that was also for the zip. And scroll a little bit down. Media type for the image is image PNG. So in case this is an image, do nothing. In case this is a zip, add a table row. So again, we go to insert or merge entity, log table, partition key, we need GUID again. And in the JSON entity, I'm just gonna copy paste now and add a file name. And in case of default, so no cases were matched, let's delete the blob. And delete the blob. And we need to specify the path. I will give the dynamic path, so we delete the blob that came in. So this is the switch control. So let's save it. And let's run it. Let's go to the blob and let's upload 2 files again, actually 3 files, so we got also txt file. Okay, we've run it. We can actually force the run easily, so we don't wait those 3 minutes, and see the results. We'll actually go back to the switch control here and see the run history. I will actually refresh. Run the trigger just to be sure. And wait a couple of seconds. I just quickly reminded myself, since our 2 other logic apps are actually deleting the files, let's make sure to disable them. So let's disable the parallel execution and let's go into the conditional also and also disable it. So let's go back and re-upload our files. A text file, an image file and a zip file. Hit upload. Let's go back and now force the trigger again. In just a couple of seconds we should actually see results now. That's actually very crucial for you to remember if you're doing a lot of triggers on the same storage account. And we have a success. So if we click one of them and see the output, let's actually zoom this out a little bit. In this case, we were processing a zip file, since the media type was application zip compressed. Therefore, we went in the second case in insert and merged entity. Going back to our presentation, next on the list we have loops. Loops allows us to iterate through either collections or until some condition was met. Those are 2 types of for each and until. Let's go into Portal and do a loop demo. Before we do, let's not always forget to disable the logic app. Go back and open an until, or actually let's start from for each. So in the for each, we always start with blank. This time I will do a different type of logic app. I'm gonna do the one that is triggered with HTTP request. But I will not pass anything. I just want this as a trigger so I can manually force the execution. Second of all, we're gonna list a blob storage files. So let's go to blob, list blobs action, And let's list all the files in a demo container. This action will return an array with a list of objects on this blob storage. Let's hit a new step, and now let's create our loop. So you go in the control action and you have for each loop. When for each is created, you need to specify what array will it iterate over. So you hit here and you automatically are prompted to choose the item. You have only one array in your logic app, which is returned by the list blob action. Let's hit OK. And now you can actually do anything here. I will actually use my common scenario of deleting the blob. So I will go to Azure Blob Storage, delete the blob, and you need to specify the path. The way you specify the path for the current iteration is, I would say, a little bit tricky, because this list blob action here is right now only for the current iteration. So here you specify path, and if you even hover over, it says items for each path. That means your current iteration path. So let's hit save. Let's go to the blob storage and upload a couple of files. And upload. Go back to the designer and force the run again. The logic app just ran, and as you see, we executed 7 times in iteration. Each for each file. You can actually review each iteration, which is one of the greatest things about logging in logic apps. You can review every single iteration and see what happened exactly within that iteration. So right now we go to the second scenario. That was the first one. So we deleted each blob for each iteration. The second we have until. For the until, we're gonna do the scenario that you probably all know from the college if you were programming and learning programming. So we're gonna do an iteration from 0 to 10 and finish the iteration as soon as the iterator, the counter, reached 10. So let's go back to logic app, and as always, disable the current logic app, go back to list of our logic apps, go to the until, select blank logic app, hit a request and a trigger, and for now, we will need something called variable. Variable will allow me to create this counter that we are talking about. So we need to create a variable. To create variable, you need to hit initialize variable step. This variable will be of type integer, and it will be called counter. And we'll start from 0. Now that we have our counter, we need to create until loop. Go to the control actions, select until. So until the counter is less than 10, do whatever we want to do and increase the counter. So go to variables, increment variable, select the counter, type 1. So we increase the counter by 1 for each iteration. I will run it and immediately tell you that this will not work, because it's a little bit tricky to know that the condition that is executed in the until is condition of exit. Therefore, as you see, we run only once. So let's say, why is that? This is the condition that when met for true, it will finish. It will actually stop executing the until. So in our case, is 0 less than 10? Yes, it's true. Therefore, it finished immediately after running. So the condition that in order for this to work has to be greater than or equal to 10. So let's save this, run it, and in this case, it should run 10 times. Let's see that. Exactly 10. So as expected, that's perfect. While I'm here, I want to just tell you one very important thing. Until runs in a sequence by default. Therefore, you are allowed to do those kind of iterations. But if you go back, go to, not to the parallel, go to for each and go to designer, you have to know that this for each loop runs in parallel. This is a crucial thing to know when designing applications, because if you would create iterator here like this counter, it would by default fail because it would not be able to increment anything in parallel. You would just get weird results. If you want this for each to run in parallel, you go to settings, and there's something called concurrency control, which you can control how many parallel executions of this for each is running at one. If you select run, this will be run sequentially. So it's an important thing to know, and you should remember that. So let's go back to presentation. And the next we have Terminate. Terminate allows you for early closing of the logic apps. So if you encountered some, let's say, issue that you did know can happen, you can early terminate your logic app. So the scenario that we'll do right now is whenever there's a new blob coming in, if it's an archive, let's terminate that. So let's try that and go to designer. Let's again start from the blank logic app and let's create a trigger for the blob storage. Whenever there's a new file coming in, again, we're going to be checking on a demo container. Let's create the control and a condition that we already know. And whenever file name ends with .zip, then we want to terminate. So let's hit Control and terminate. Terminate allows us to terminate and specify the status of the logic app. So this is a great way if you were not expecting some sort of file, like we were in a switch. If there's a file that you are not expecting, you can fail it. You can even type the message code like 400 and say, for instance, zip not supported. In other case, you can delete the blob as usual. Let's delete the blob and specify the path. Let's hit save. Let's zoom out this a little bit. And let's go back to the blob container and upload some files. I'm gonna upload 2 files. And go back to designer and hit run. This runs successfully. As you've seen, we run first for our PNG file, but if you're gonna go to the flow and refresh the status, you're gonna see the second run failed as expected because we terminated this because our condition was not met. And the very last thing we want to talk about is scope. Scope is a great control for you to encapsulate some sort of workflow actions into singular block, so you can do some sort of exception handling. You can think of it like try and catch in a programming language. So let's do this scenario. We're gonna try for each new blob, delete it twice. Of course, this will fail if you're gonna try delete the blob that was already deleted. And let's display the results. So let's first disable this logic app, go back and go to our last logic app, which is scope. In the designer, we're again starting from the blank logic app. We're choosing the blob trigger whenever there's a new blob. On a demo container, hit new, blob storage, delete blob, and let's delete the blob that we currently have. So again, specify the path and do the same thing twice. So let's delete it by specifying the path. Of course, this will fail because you're trying to delete twice. So let's go to the control and add a scope action. One of the good things about logic apps is that you can actually drag and drop. So let's drag and drop our actions into scope block. Having scope block allows you to catch those errors. So let's add one more step, which will be variable. This is where we're just gonna hold our output so we can review it in the logs. Let's initialize variable. This will be variable of type array and call it result. And the value for this will be an expression, and an expression that returns results from the scope block. To do so, you just use result function and the name of the action. In our case, it's scope. So let's hit OK. And one last thing that you need to do is that because any actions in scope block will fail, entire block will fail. So what you need to do here is click on those three dots, actually on this step, configure run after, and make sure that you also continue even if the block failed. So let's hit save. Let's go back here. Actually, let's upload blobs right now. I'm gonna upload this file. It doesn't matter, I'm gonna override it. And let's hit run. The run just finished. As you see, as expected, the first step succeeded, the second failed, the entire block failed, and since we configure run after, we are able to salvage it and do some exception handling. So in our variable, we have the result, and the result from the scope block is the name of each action with the status and response. So you see the first status was OK and succeeded, and the second blob was failed with the status blob not found, which is expected. But this allows you to create exception handling for those blocks. And that was this scenario that we just implemented.
As you see, using control actions is pretty straightforward. It's up to you right now to design your workflow that suits your business needs. But always remember, pricing might be a little bit tricky with Logic Apps, so try to keep it simple. That's it for today. If you liked the video, hit a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you want to see more, subscribe, and see you next time.